Board of Registration, Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors. I'd like to call the meeting to order. So as a roll call, Kenzie, you're going to capture presence online.
Sure. It looks like online we have Bryce Dickinson, Denise Castleman, Greg Schieferstein, Jill Short, Kevin Ballard, Marjorie Munn, board chair, Matt Rasmussen, board member, Randy Garcia, Shannon, and Vonna in attendance.
And so I don't see Ms. Lagerberg yet.
No, we do not, but yeah.
And so present we have Mr. Harney and Maureen Jackson and Christine Horton and yourself, Mr. Fuller and I. So I think we've got, did you say Ian is already present?
No, Ian will be joining us a little bit later.
Okay, so I'd like to, I guess I can say call to order, okay? There you go, just for you.
I wanted to be more authoritative, honestly.
Yeah, well, it may have some fracture lines, I don't know. I would hate to have it fall off. So, like to request a motion on the agenda.
I make a motion to accept the agenda.
Second.
Moved, seconded. Any discussion, amendments?
Doug,
Yes,
can we go back to the roll call? And
I see.
introduce new
Yes.
staff?
Be delighted, be delighted. In doing so, I'd like, Mr. Ballard, would you care to introduce yourself and give us some more detail?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me first?
You can.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Pleasure to meet you all. I'm sure in the near future, I'll meet you all in person. I'm very happy and proud to be here as the internal control manager for the Washington State Board of Registration for Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors. I'm looking forward to working with you all and contributing to the important work that we do for the state of Washington. Short introduction about my past. For the past 10 years, I've served in the United States Army as an artillery officer, which culminated with me commanding 2 batteries, both one here in JBLM and then one in South Korea. During that time, I've had a lot of experiences across many different locations, but it's taught me a lot about leadership, accountability, managing complex problems, which I'm really eager to bring to the team. I'm really excited to be a part of this team, and I look forward to working with you all and serving the public interest. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Kevin. I'm glad to hear of your service, and we appreciate it. My own father and grandfather were U.S. Army artillery. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And Marjorie, do you have any further additions from that discussion?
No, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, we have a motion and a second on the agenda. All in favor of approving the agenda as written? Please say aye.
Aye.
And I did not hear the other 2 board
This
members.
is Marjorie. Matt, would you say your response again, please?
Aye.
Okay, and I actually don't see Aaron. Is he not in yet?
We do not see Aaron.
So we have 5. Thank
We
you.
have-
That's-
Just a quorum, I guess. Right? 5?
I think
Correct. That was-
Oh, 4, I guess, could be a
4
quorum.
should be our quorum, but we
Yeah.
also have both that and the majority. So, okay. So 5 is good, and the agenda is approved as written. And at this point, but I'm going to announce that we have an executive session coming up. That we'll have no formal actions during that session. But let's go to the standard reading pursuant to RCW 4230-110. And for the purposes set forth therein, the board will move into the executive session portion of the meeting to consult with the board attorney, to review performance of the director, to discuss matters relating to enforcement and cases in current litigation. The executive session will last 1 hour and 40 minutes. And once the executive session concludes, the board reconvenes open session. It's now 8:05 and the board will reconvene at 9:45. Kenzie, would you please pause the recording? Thank you.
There, now that was something, that made me jump.
Look at that.
Awesome.
That pisses me off. My own phone tells me my password is expired. I need to. Which means it's actually the work protocol passwords. That aren't active.
You can learn something from that gal strike, Doug.
Thank you. I've done that before, but we are resumed. And do we have any? We don't have anyone looking.
Visitors?
I did not see any public members and do check. No, we do not.
Okay, so I'm not gonna continue with, we'll skip over that if it's not applicable. So as reconvening, we're back at 9:45. And in the call to order, we now have action of dealing with our December 12th minutes. Do we have a motion in that regard?
I move to approve our December 12th minutes.
Second it.
Moved by, my mind's gone.
Miss
Maureen
Jackson.
Jackson, yes. And seconded by Mr. Harney. Any comments, discussion? My only comment would be that we appreciate the quality of the development of those minutes. Thank you. Hearing no further discussion, comments, I call the question. All those in favor of approving the minutes as December 12th, 2025, as written, please convey that by saying aye.
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 Minutes are approved. I'd like to move now and not express a public comment opportunity because we have no public members present. So next on the agenda would be disciplinary actions under item 3, case deliberations. And Ms. Jill Short under 3.1, would you begin?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Mr. Chair. For case closure recommendations, we have 3 closure recommendations. The first 2 I will be reading for Mr. Peden, who is not available at this meeting. The first case number is 2024-03-0585-00 OSW. This complaint was against an on-site septic system designer and an installer alleging they allowed the septic drain field to be installed on top of the water line. A new system was installed in early 2023 prior to the previous homeowner advertising the home for sale. The complainant and his wife purchased the home in May of 2023 and moved in late June. In December 2023, an excessively high water bill indicated they had a water line leak. During the complainant's leak investigation, he learned that his water line was under the new drain field and the line was not sleeved. Further investigation revealed that the permit release drawings made it abundantly clear that the water line was to have been relocated to 5 feet or more away from the drain field and sleeved. The permit release drawings represent the conditions that were disclosed to the complainant at the time of the home purchase and not the actual location of the water line. The complainant feels that the as-built was falsified by the designer. Facts, a response was received stating the complainant alleges that he knowingly falsified his record drawing of the installed septic components at the project site, specifically the location of the water line from the meter to the house. Additionally, the complainant alleges that the respondent was never on the property. The on-site design in question was performed for the previous homeowner. The previous homeowner contacted the respondent's company to design a new septic system for her property, as the existing system was in a state of failure. Prior to making a site visit to excavate soil logs for the design, the respondent marked the property in white paint for identification by 811. The utilities were located prior to their site visit for the soil log excavation. The respondent personally excavated the soil logs for the septic design on October the 24th of 2022, as 811 does not leave the water lines does not locate the water lines beyond the water meter. He asked the homeowner where the water line entered the house. Her response was that she was unsure where the water line entered, but she believed that the water line entered somewhere on the northeast portion of the house. They proceeded with their design of the replacement and submitted the design to the county health department for review. The design was approved on February the 7th of 2023 with permit conditions stating that the 5-foot water line setback reduction to the drain field was approved on the condition that the installer was to move the water line as required to maintain the 5-foot setback to the drain field and sleeve the water line in its new location. The water line was shown in the north corner abutting the cul-de-sac. At the time of system installation, the installation firm excavated around the drain field along the water line path as depicted in the design, but they were unable to locate the water line. The installer excavation for the water line was at a depth of approximately 6 feet below the ground surface, which is much deeper than water lines are usually located. After additional discussion with the homeowner regarding the water line location, the previous homeowner said that she now believed her water line was located on the property abutting to the west. There is a prominent water meeting near the cul-de-sac and another apparent water meter further east along the driveway. The respondent determined that it is plausible that after the installer's extensive excavation, one of the 2 water meters located would be the meter to serve the previous homeowner site. Given this information by the homeowner and seeing the 2 apparent water meters, the respondent showed the water line on the record drawing from the meter at the second location that was closest to the previous owner's home. The complainant alleges that the water line to his house was struck by the installer at the time of the installation. He came to this conclusion because his water bill at some point well after the system installation was significantly higher than it should be. The installer made an additional site visit to investigate the source of the leak and discovered that the water line into the meter was leaking and not from damage to the water line caused by the installation of the septic system. The complainant states that he did not perform his due diligence to locate the water line and that simply digging by hand revealed the actual location of the water line. The respondent believes this to be false because the complainant hired a plumber to locate the water line from inside the house. Any error in the depiction of the actual water line location was not intentional or due to negligence or malaise. Due diligence was exercised in the attempt to locate the water line both by the respondent and the septic system installation contractor. Depiction of the water line on the record drawing was arrived at after review of the aforementioned water line exploration and consultation with the then homeowner. The case was reviewed by an on-site septic system designer subject matter expert. Following interviews with the respondent, the environmental health department, staff, and the subject matter expert, this case manager determined there was no malicious intent on the respondent's part. There was a series of errors on several individuals involved in the project. The case manager conducted a successful remedial counseling with the respondent and feels the case should be closed with no further action.
Thank you.
I move we approve the case manager's recommendation for closure.
Second.
Second is Mr. Matt.
Matt. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Rasmussen. It's been moved and seconded. Discussion? Hearing no further discussion. All in favor of approving the motion to close this with no further action for 2024-03-05 8535 double lot OSW, please say aye.
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 Approved. Thank you. There are no nays and no abstentions, so we're moving forward. Second case, Jill.
Okay, the second case is number 2024-10-2789-00 OSW. A complaint was received alleging an on-site septic system designer was hired to design a repair replacement for an existing failing on-site system. The respondent started work in early December of 2023, and he finally had it ready for submittal to the Environmental Health Department in March of 2024. On April 26, 2024, the design was disapproved by the Health Department. The respondent promised to make sure and get the revisions completed. At this point, the complainant alleges he had difficulty with communication with the respondent. The complainant alleges he is getting close to his building timeline and still does not have an approved design by the respondent, who was fully paid for his work. The facts are, a response was received by the respondent stating the on-site design in question was planned as a repair replacement of a failing existing gravity system for the existing single-family residence, which would also include an expansion of the OSS capacity to include flows for the existing unpermitted accessory dwelling unit on the property to be brought into compliance. Both structures are provided water service by the existing individual well on the property. The soil logs and site measurements for the design were taken on December the 12th of 2023. The design was submitted to the Environmental Health Department for review on March 13th, 2024, upon receipt of payment for the design fees from the complainant. The design was disapproved by the Environmental Health Inspector due to many reasons. The respondent continued stating while there were a number of deficiencies on the design, most were due to his inexperience with the county's design procedures. The respondent had spoken with the complainant regarding the critical areas report, also known as a critical areas designation, CAD certificate. Prior to submitting the design for review, he asked that the respondent submit the design without the CAD and follow up with it once approved during the design review process. The respondent contacted the supervisor of the Environmental Health Department and inquired about submitting the design without the CAD. The supervisor said that it would be unusual to do so, but would result in a disapproval of the design until the CAD could be completed and provided. The complainant agreed to this stipulation and directed the respondent to proceed per his request. The respondent stated, while he did fail to meet some completion deadlines that he had communicated to the complainant, there were other influencing factors that prevented him from meeting those deadlines. He did not lie to the complainant, nor were there any intentions on his part to mislead or deceive him. Given the significant level of effort and energy required to resolve the design holds and come up with creative solutions to the challenges presented, it was his opinion that the complaints against him were without merit. This case was reviewed by an on-site septic designer subject matter expert, and following successful remedial counseling with the case manager and the respondent on his responsibilities under WAC 196-33-200, the case manager is recommending the case be closed with no further action.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion in this regard?
I move that we approve the case manager's recommendation to close with no further action.
Second.
Thank you. Been moved and seconded. Discussion? Hearing no discussion. All in favor of approving the case manager's recommendation for closure for 2024-10-2789 double lot OSW, please say aye.
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 Closure is approved. We have one more. Jill, would you like to introduce that?
I sure would. That last one is number 2024-10-3001-00ENG, and Ms. Lund is the case manager.
The complainant submits that a professional engineer's engineering failed to meet stipulations in the contract and contained errors. They claim that the PE refused to provide engineering compliant to the contract, to correct errors, or to provide a refund. The complainant, an individual who is the project owner, contracted with the PE to provide structural design drawings for a 3-story triplex over a partially buried multi-car garage. Sorry about the church bells. The complainant explains.
Thank you. That's okay.
You can still hear me okay? All right. The complainant explains that they were not informed of changes to the architectural design that were requested by the engineering firm during design. They discovered these changes on the submitted drawings after final payment of the contract. The changes presumably reduced the number of parking spaces in the garage and did not work with the owner's pro forma. The owner then discussed alternative structural systems with the engineer's staff. The engineer requested additional compensation to make the changes since it was work beyond the contract. The owner did not feel he should have to pay for those changes. The contract, so the facts are, the contract between the complainant and the respondent stipulates that the structure shall be based on a set of drawings from a particular date. It also states that the contact person is the architectural designer and not the owner. In the case manager's opinion, the schematic level drawings that were attached to the contract as a basis for design did not have enough shear walls at the basement level to resist lateral loads on the 4-story structure. Changes to the plans to resist lateral loads were necessary to meet building codes and permitting requirements. The respondent submitted emails indicating that this coordination was performed between the engineering firm and the designer approved the changes. The contract did not require the engineer to contact the owner directly, and they stated that they presumed that the designer was responsible for this coordination. Concerning the errors noted by the complainant, they are minor in nature and may not have changed the structural elements, and they may have been noted by the building official. This case manager's review is solely for the purpose of determining possible violations of state laws and is not an engineering review of the quality or correctness of the design documents. Given the stipulations of the contractual agreement, there is no indication of violations of RCW or WAC regulations. Case manager recommends closure with no further action.
Thank you, Marjorie. Other board members, do I have a motion?
I move to accept the case manager's recommendation to close the case with no further action.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded by Ms. Jackson, Mr. Rasmussen. Any comments, discussion? You looked really pensive.
Maybe about something else.
I see. No other comments or discussion. With that, I ask all in favor to approve the motion to close with no further action, 2024-10, 3001 double odd ENG. Please say aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions?
This is Marjorie. I abstain.
Thank you. This board does not need my vote. We have a majority, 3 votes already, so approved. We have 3 ayes. So that's the majority, and that works. Okay. Thank you very much. I got that, yes. Thank you. Section 3.2 on our agenda. Jill, you're gonna introduce Denitza and we'll move forward with this?
I sure will. Yes. So this is a proposed default order that our prosecuting attorney, Denitza Castleman, will be presenting. And I don't really know that do you want me to read all those numbers?
No.
Okay, so
Tell you what, I will.
Okay,
As
thank you.
presented in the default order, these relate to complaints 2024-09, 2412, double lot LSV, 2024-04, 70720, double lot LSV, 2405, 1121, double lot LSV, 2023-04, 0553, double lot LSV, and 2024-02, 0420, double lot LSV. So in case you haven't trended that, those are complaints in 2023 and 2024. 1 in 23 and 4 more in 24. Okay. Thank you. Ms. Castleman.
Thank you. May it please the board, Denitza Castleman, Assistant Attorney General and Prosecutor for the board. I'm appearing to present a default order on behalf of board staff. Borpal staff requests that the board enter a default order against Jared Ripenin, who is the respondent in the noticed cases. A default order is appropriate based on the following uncontested facts. On November 20th, 2024, board staff properly served respondent with and respondent received a statement of charges, the charging document. The statement of charges packet included an answer and request for hearing and a notice of legal rights, which clearly informed respondent that a request for hearing had to be received within 20 days, and that failure to respond within that time frame could constitute or would constitute a default, meaning that the board could enter a default order on the facts available to it. So to date, the board has not received an answer or request for hearing from respondent. Accordingly, the respondent is in default pursuant to RCW 3405-440 subsection 1, and a default order is appropriate in this case. We submit the matter to the board and we thank you for your time.
Thank you. So as in their findings, what the statement charges, the answer, notice of rights was mailed on November 20th. And that is what was not responded. So
That is correct.
It has now been 3 months plus, December, January, almost 3 months. And so that's well beyond the 20 days that the respondent had to do so. So this is standard that says you're in default. We're basically going to hold you accountable for what we charged you with. I would like to ask for a motion and then we'll discuss any content further.
I move to approve the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and default order for respondent Jared W. Ripon. Sorry, I can't. Rippin.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
A second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussions, comment, assessments, anything else on this order? Hearing none, I would ask all in favor of approving board execution of this order to please say aye.
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 Aye. As it's unanimous, this order is approved. It will be prepared for Ms. Lund to sign as board chair. And Mackenzie will provide you the document for your execution. Understood?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. That's items 3.1 and 3.2. And now we would go to the disciplinary reports. Jill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you have the report in front of you. So when this report was done, we currently have 56 cases. Of course, several of those cases have been closed during this meeting, so we've gone down a bit. If anybody has any questions, please let me know.
I guess we've seen some reviews from Mr. Dale. Has Mr. Dale come off being pro temp?
No, he is still pro temp.
Okay. Do we, so we have 2 assigned pro temps, which are our current allowances.
We have an
Yeah.
asterisk too, yeah.
Yes, okay. Where, I guess I would ask, Jill and maybe Ken to consider, where do you think our greatest sensitivity remains? I mean, we see, a heavy load is over in legal. Is there any perspective, and this maybe council chiming in as well, of recovery of the load there?
Well, I can say 5 of those just came off. 5 of those cases.
That's a
so,
significant part.
Yeah. um, yeah, they're moving along, and I believe that load's going to go down quicker now that we have Randy on staff too.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, comments? Jump up and volunteer to case manager more. Okay. Thank you very much, Jill.
Thank you.
With that, we'd like to go to the committee reports. Section 4. And I'm gonna ask Mackenzie, you have a meal service later.
Due at 12. It's recommended that we take a short.
I
break.
was gonna suggest take a bio break, be back here at 10:20. So a short recess from 10:13 to 10:20. Thank you very much. Rebecca? Thank you. Returned from recess. And I would ask Mr. Harney to give us our EQ report.
Sure. Thanks, Doug. I'd actually like to do the EQ report in two parts. We've had two meetings since our last board meeting.
Please.
Due to personal circumstances, excuse me, I was not present at the first of those meetings. So I'd ask Maureen to deliver that portion of the report.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. So the exam qualifications committee meeting happened on January 29th, 2025 via Teams. Attending was Ms. Lunn, myself, Mr. Rasmussen, Mr. Fuller, Ms. Horton, Ms. Kramer, Ms. Gillespie, and Ms. Lagerberg. The committee discussed the decoupling language and the updates to the RCW to reflect that. In the December board meeting, we had discussed having the committee modify the language in the RCW, and staff put that on the SharePoint slide for us. When we discussed this in the committee meeting in January, Ms. Lagerberg just suggested that instead of editing the existing text, that those sections of the RCW be rewritten for a full cleanup. And so the action item was that Elizabeth and Shannon would work on the draft language and get it back to the committee for review. So that was the action item. Marjorie noted that we wanted to make sure that this gets completed by September. So the target for the proposed language presented to the board would be in the June meeting. So that's the target that the group is working toward. We also discussed the corresponding updates to the WAC to reflect the decoupling language in the RCW. It was noted that that is kind of going to be the second phase of the work, but that those updates would be drafted and would not proceed beyond the CR 101 until after legislative approval. The other discussion in the committee meeting was about the examination processes for EIT, LSIT, PE, PLS, and SE applicants. And the move to change our current processes to where the board would not see applications until after an applicant has passed the test. And so there was some discussion on that. And the committee noted that we would need to change the attestation that is on the NCEES website for Washington State, if that becomes our process. We had some discussion about it, and Chris suggested that we would beef up the FAQ pages that are on the website to give people clear direction and a flow chart as to if they met all the stipulations, so that they would have an idea whether or not they met the board's requirements for licensure. And then we would also provide them with staff phone number and email to where they could reach out if they had specific questions. And then there was discussion about the updates to the language in the RCW and the WAC, and Elizabeth suggested that we describe the changes as antiquated regulations that need updating. I believe that was the extent of the call. Any questions on that?
Could you please repeat the portion before you flip the page of not until legislative? So right before that, the activity right before that. You said you wouldn't go beyond CR 101 until legislative action. But were you talking about a WAC activity or supporting RCW change?
The WAC updates. So the updates.
Following RCW change.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a clarification. I saw it. Any other comments, questions?
Well done, Marty.
Thank you. And you have a second?
Correct. Just for background, we had the two meetings purposefully when we were tasked with updating language in the RCW. The impetus for the first meeting just described was for the committee to actually kind of go through the proposed edits, et cetera, prior to the second meeting, which was just yesterday, that I'll describe here, so that we would be prepared today based on that hypothetical to present that language to the board. When it was decided in the first EQC meeting that Maureen just described, that we were going to totally rewrite things. We obviously aren't prepared to do that. We still held the second EQC meeting yesterday. I feel like we all owe you an apology, Maureen, because I think we keep not calling you by your right name. So yesterday's meeting was held here in this room in person at the CTAC Radisson Hotel. Present was the committee, myself and Maureen Jackson. Matthew Rasmussen was present for a portion of the meeting virtually. Support staff were present either in person or virtually, including Mr. Fuller, Ms. Morton, Ms. Kramer, Ms. Gillespie, Ms. Lagerberg, Ms. Warrett, Mr. Dickinson, Ms. Short, Mr. Garcia, Mr. Schieferstein, Chair Marjorie Lund attended as a guest virtually. So we continued a few topics, but the first topic that we discussed here were the review of six applications for professional engineering licensure. 3 of those were for licensure by exam. 2 were initial licensure, and 1 was by company. Of those 6, we approved 2. Those happen to be 2 PE by exam, and we asked staff, in other words, Mr. Fuller and Ms. Kramer, to work together to gather additional information from the other applicants that we felt were, as provided, deficient in one way or another. So Ken and Vonna have been directed by the committee to notify those 4 applicants of the general deficiencies regarding their applications, and then to rectify those deficiencies if possible and resubmit the applications.
Do we have any questions on? You're probably not done, but I'll ask a question.
That was a strategic pause.
Yes. Okay. So was the director and staff then directed that if those shortfalls were remediated, they would proceed with the balance of moving them forward to examination or licensure?
I don't know that there was specific action directed to Ken and staff in that regard. I think the expectation is that those applications, unless in the director's opinion, are so cut and dry that they should be approved or denied, that they would come back to the committee for approval if appropriate. Ken, is that your understanding?
Yes.
Okay, so they would be going back to the committee.
Unless they decided mutually or the applicant decided, I recognize I don't meet those qualifications right now, so there's no need to resubmit.
Okay. Thank
There
you.
were a couple that seemed to be 1 or 2 years shy of the experience, so it may not be that they're coming right back. It may be that they recognize that they need to have more experience before they apply again.
And were these parties who are initial licensure parties, or were those pending exam?
One of them was actually a comedy license, so already licensed in another state. And then but I think that make sure all three of those.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
Yeah, and one of them was similar, that they're licensed in Canada. But based on our evaluation of their experience, they appear to be short in terms of experience for licensure in Washington State.
thank you, sir. Please continue.
Continuing. Second topic that we discussed, we reviewed language updates, the PE application form, and that the changes that we had discussed to that form in prior QC meetings had been accomplished by staff. However, upon review, I believe our guest at the QC meeting, Marjorie, did note that, suggested that having another statement on the form, on the verification form, similar to a statement that is present on the SE license verification form, would be prudent. The committee agreed. And so staff has been directed to add additional language to the verification form itself. And generally speaking, it will read as follows. I think there's some tweaking that will need to happen to this language. So while I'm going to quote it, don't quote me on it. As follows: the competency of licensed engineers in Washington State is based on education, examination, and experience. You are declaring your knowledge of this applicant's experience and your belief of their readiness to seal construction documents. Verifiers must use full descriptions. Excuse me. So I think there's probably some tweaking to that language, but in general terms, that's the statement that we intend to have added to the verification form. Any questions on that?
I would probably assert that it's not a construction document, but a design document.
That's, frankly, Doug, that's some of the specific language that I'm referring to needs to be tweaked.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Mr.
I
Rasmussen.
apologize. I had to leave the EQC meeting before we talked about the form. Are we going to address the language on the application where it essentially exempts federal government and manufacturing employees? Is that going to be addressed with this next round of changes?
Correct, Matt, and I believe it was on the form that was provided to us for review. Unless I'm misremembering. So I think we did tackle that one, I believe, Matt.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. Regarding the decoupling process, really most of that update was provided by Maureen from the first meeting. So I think you all have the status of that. However, with specific regard to the what we're calling the attestation, frankly, I believe it's more of an instruction than an attestation that will be on the NCWS website to potential exam takers. There was a couple sample pieces of language that were provided to the committee by staff for review in yesterday's meeting. We prefer one to the other, and if approved by the board, this language would be added to the NCWS website. It is as follows. Application to the Washington State Board is not required for examination. However, you must have passed the FE exam and have that information available in your account as follows. First bullet: if you took the FE exam from October 2010 through the present, your passing results will show your exam history. You will be automatically approved. If you took the FE exam before October 2010, you must request for your FE exam to be verified in your account. To accomplish this, look on the right side of your dashboard when you log in, where there will be a link to exam verification. Click on the request verification at the top of the page and follow the steps to request your state board where you took and passed the exam. Keep in mind, some state boards require ample time to process the verification plan accordingly. End of the second bullet. last paragraph. One's both the NCAAS fundamentals examination, FE. Is that the correct title? Fundamentals examination?
Fundamentals of engineering.
Okay. And principles and practices examination, PE or VAST, you will meet the board's requirements for that applications for licensure that be submitted to the board. One note, two notes here. First, as clarification, this sample language, and we've been difficult to prove it on the contingency that we do end up fully decoupling and implement changed language within the RCW plan or anything. So we're just looking to get the ducks in a row so that if that eventuality comes to
Have
pass.
have them queued up with RCW and WAC changes.
Correct. And then we did also ask, and it's difficult to read. So note that in that last sentence, when the board's requirements are referenced in that sentence, we intend to have board's requirements hyperlinked to the RCW so that they're easily accessible and you can see what those requirements are.
I would ask staff, has that been a demonstrated capability of the NCEES website and their implementation for other states?
The hyperlink or the statement? Hyperlink?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
The external data.
I think there is an existing hyperlink, right? Washington board is hyperlinked right now with the statement that's on NCEES.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Marjorie, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to comment again that attestation needs to address all examinations, surveying and engineering, and that there needs to be something about the FEFS also mentioned, that they don't need to come to us until after they've passed that. So there needs to be some work on that. It's not just addressing PE. Does that make sense, Mike? I mean, I assume staff will put that together, but we have got to make it clear, and perhaps it's listing all of those exams, and Washington State does not require you to apply to us first. And then the information about the FEFS verification.
Understood. It's a good point, and we overlooked it yesterday.
Thank you. Any further comment? Question?
There's further discussion points. It's a good meeting. The last topic that we discussed, we were asked by the board to look into the possibility of using the California seismic exam as an additional exam requirement for our licensees, specifically for civil licensees or civil structural licensees. There was not really a distinction made in the request or specificity with regard to that. So we did 2 EQC meetings ago ask staff to contact other boards about their use of the California seismic exam, whether they do it or not, and any feedback with regard to that. That feedback was received. Essentially, of the responding boards, only California itself and Guam require and use the California seismic exam in any capacity. We discussed as a committee if we desire to move forward with making requiring PE civil or PE civil structural applicants pass the California seismic exam for licensure in the state of Washington. It was recognized that there would be quite a few issues to resolve, including legislative issues as well as stakeholder issues. If the committee and ultimately the board elected to do so. And the committee at this time has decided to table discussion of requiring California seismic exam for our applicants until further notice, revisit in the future.
Thank you. Does that complete your report?
Essentially, yes.
I don't see any other questions at this time. The EQC committee report has been received. I would ask Marjorie to please address the structural committee report.
Okay, let's. The structural committee met on January 27th virtually and in Olympia at 2:30 p.m. Present were Dave Peden, Chair, myself, Chun Lau, Pro Tem, is on the committee, and support staff. Present was Ken Fuller, Christina Horton, Ivana Kramer, Shannon Gillespie, and our advising Attorney General Elizabeth Lagerberg. So our discussion topics started with revisions we're looking at for the structural application. And we've been kind of going back and forth on these various different requirements, trying to improve how the applicant conveys their knowledge base to us. But we spent most of this meeting discussing how many verifiers we can ask somebody to submit. And Dave was encouraging us to perhaps say 3 verifiers. We've backed down from that and we're going to require 2. We have recommended it in the past, and sometimes we get 2 and sometimes we just get 1 supervisor. But we're also going to say that if we want somebody to submit 2 verifiers, one of them should be their direct supervisor, familiar with their work. The other second, maybe a colleague or a client or someone familiar with their work. So we are making those changes on the application. We have an action item for the committee to complete review of the SE application by the next meeting, trying to get this resolved so we can get those updates done at the same time that EQC is working on PE application. We then discussed the SE exam updates from NCWS. So there's 4 parts to the structural exam. 2 parts are given any time of year. That's called a LOFT, linear on the fly exam. And 2 parts, which are considered the depth sections, are given twice a year. And those are called linear fixed format, and they're given in April and October. So we've been waiting for the October results. They were finally released right before our meeting. And Chun took that information for the year and also went back through NCWS documents, the Square publication, and gleaned out all of the structural pass rates, number of examinees and pass rates over the last few years, and put together a spreadsheet for us to review. And then I added information working with Ivana on pass rates for structurals in the state of Washington. And we still need to do a little bit of work on that, but essentially it was no surprise to say that previous pass rates for structural for our state, as best as we could determine, was between 30 and 40 people per year. And in 2024, there were 5 new licensees in state. based on examination. Some of those results are not completely accurate because people can go take the exam in another state and then still come to us for initial licensure. So anybody who had an address in a different state, we've sort of treated them as if they were comedy, even though some of it's initial licensure. But in terms of the people who actually live in state, who took the exam and passed it in 2024, there were 5 new licensees. So that's a concern, and we are continuing to look at how we can address that with NCEES. There's a meeting at the end of this month that Ken has championed for us to speak with board members from all the other states that have a SE Practice Act. And we've asked specifically the board members that have SEs to join us and have a conversation about some of the issues we're hearing with problems that the examinees are seeing at the testing sites. And lastly, we discussed the decoupling of the SE exam. And the SE committee is deferring to the EQC to proceed with decoupling in the same way that they're proceeding with the other disciplines. Let's see, there was one other comment. Going back to the application reviews, we asked Elizabeth if it would be acceptable to add some kind of attestation on the application that says that the applicant is familiar with Washington State Building Code and/or standards and design requirements. And she says that legally it's acceptable if we want to add that kind of attestation to applications. And there was discussions of, well, when we say that they have to meet all the applicable laws in Washington, that would include, of course, the state building codes and design requirements for bridges and whatnot. So do we add that attestation or not? We haven't really confirmed that, but we've at least found out that legally we can if we want to add that to the application. That's my full report.
So Marjorie, I have a question about the, you were noting 5 new SEs last year. Do we know how many people took the exam? Is it that we have 100 people taking it and only 5 people are passing, or is it 8 people took it, 5 people passed?
You know, I didn't bring up that spreadsheet at the moment, but the difficulty is that so many people are now applying for examinations and just putting down different states, that we don't really have an accurate count of how many people in Washington State actually take the exam. But we do know how many people nationally, and the pass rates for these depth portions are between 14 and 16%.
Okay.
And so that's kind of the limiting factor, because you have to pass all 4 sections of the exam. And the issue, I mean, just my personal speaking, is that the exam quality is very similar to the previous years. I sat on all 4 cut scores to be able to kind of have an appreciation for how this exam got converted to CBT. And the exam quality does not seem to be any more difficult or different in that way. It's obviously presented in a different way, because it used to be that an examinee was given a problem, you sit down and you write out all the calculations. Now they have to do it in a multiple choice or fill in the blank or move things around format. The issues are structural has over 10 references that we use back and forth between codes and standards and material properties and things. And so compared to the other PE exams, there's a lot more lookup and use of reference materials. I came back from the EPE meeting just a few days ago, and we had reports from every exam committee leader for all, it's 39 PE exams. And many of the exams have a handbook that is prepared by the society. So the Society of Petroleum Engineers and the Society of Naval Architecture. And they prepare this handbook. So there is one reference manual that goes up on the screen in the, when the examinee is taking the exam. And it's a little bit easier to, find information that way as compared to trying to go back and forth with multiple reference materials. The reference materials are, some are not page numbered, some don't have hyperlinks from the indexes, some are very difficult to do search, and you can only open one page of one reference material at a time. So all of this just compounds the difficulty that an examinee is seeing, because they're not used to this sort of format until they actually go into the test center. So it's potentially, that's the limiting factor. It's just this familiarity with the restrictions at Pearson VUE testing centers that is causing the issues. So.
Thank you.
And I think part of your question was fractional information, and we're not going to see anything until someone has passed all 4 segments. With that, any other questions for Marjorie? Thank you. We've received the structural committee's report. And I don't suppose we have Aaron.
We do not.
So I'll go ahead and provide the survey committee report. Survey committee met yesterday here in this room at Radisson from 9 to 10:30. And we had Mr. Blaisdell and myself present, and Mr. Rasmussen virtually. We have pretty much all of our staff that are present on this call. And we had additional guests of Tony Chenier as a new LSAW liaison, Lucas Lyman Grover, and Paul Galley as surveyor guests. From our agenda, we had a review of PDH content of WAC 196.16 and RCW 1843.80. Discontinuities and issues of how PDH requirements are implemented and carried in discussions between those RCW and the WAC. I took an action item to mark up 196.16, prepare that initial markup, and to have a task group, including the LSAW liaison and Ms. Horton and Shannon to draft that for the next meeting and to have that available. I will say that I've done that markup right now, and I And by the way, council will be involved in looking at that as well, to try and make that so it doesn't conflict. Particularly, we don't want to end up in a challenge position with the RCW language, which says you'll have 15 PDHs per year. So we've drafted that, and the committee will have that to review and advance for considerations of WAC 196-16 changes in maybe not too far future. Looked at the PLS state exam. And as Chris reported, the exam verification subject matter expert group met January 23rd, 24th, reviewed 2 exams, new exam forms. And the next exam would be March 21st of this year. And one of those exam forms will be used. I think although it's not particularly noted here, the subject matter expert group affirmed the form, content, expression, and results, answers and distractors associated with all the questions. So the discussion of items was how many, we have 164 items now in that item bank heading into exams. And so Chris and Mr. Ballard, abbreviated B, I have to remember it now, thank you. Will prepare the preliminary plan for moving to CBT and considerations on that for this PLS state exam. And for the April committee meeting, they'll be presenting on that. We spoke to professional practice under 196-29-110, dealing with retention of records. So the action item out of that, it basically is that there's some aspects of WAC that are not specific in how they're doing things. And gosh, the 332 is pretty prescriptive. Anyway, so we have a CR 101 open for this 196-29-110 right now. But we're going to get some of that draft out to board survey members, pro tem, and to the LSAW liaison to determine if some changes should be recommended for the WAC. That will come back before the April meeting. And in rulemaking, several items I think are under discussion with 332 on vocals and DNR, map requirements, recording checklists, and a number of legislative bills and impacts, including on subdivisions and common interest.
Washington Uniform Common Interest Ownership Act.
Yes, so used to be condominiums, so it's now, right?
Kaiwa, yeah.
So now they gotta have a new abbreviation. And I would say those pose some action items moving forward, and that would be complete the content of the survey committee meeting. Any questions at this time?
None for me, thanks.
Thank you, Marjorie. Did I misstate anything, Matt?
Nope, you did an excellent job.
Well, then send that to our staff. They made those notes. Okay. Thank you. I'll call that received. And then next up is the executive committee meeting, and presumptively, you wish me to present that, Madam Chair?
It would be great if you would, Doug. Thank you.
Okay. So, executive committee met here yesterday in this room at Radisson. Mr. Peden is on travel, so Ms. London and I were present, or virtually, and we had our support staff, and the ancillary addition to that is Mr. Shelley, our senior financial consultant. And we have pretty much everyone else there, and Mr. Harney happened to be here as a guest. Very silent one, by the way, so I don't think he even commented. I think he was just doing his other work. Anyway, we did have a financial report. In summary perspective, we're expecting to see a slight increase at the end of the biennium to 1.54 at the end of to 1.54 million under current projections. The expenses reports were pretty consistent. There are still some aspects of governor's budget, I guess that need to be affected. His budget provided authorization well beyond what we're currently planning to spend. And I guess in further discussion, an ask to reduce expenses across the board to agencies. Our agency has proposed a 3% authorization decrease. So that's still well beyond, but that's still well beyond our anticipated expenditures. So it's more of a paper area reduction from our current perspectives, unless something else changes. And so we still have legislator and governors working with monies and budgets, and so we're going to keep our eyes out. The CR 103 for 19609 112. This deals with records and so making indexing of information, and so that has been reviewed, received unsubstantial comment from the organization that's been really pushing it. Staff has amended the language, provided it in CR 103 and the concise explanatory statement, and the recommended language and CES are in further action item, recommended for board action and approval. We also did talk to the CR 103 and concise explanatory statement for 19626A and 19630. Shannon, can you summarize what was in that again?
Sure. So 19626A and 19630, it's amending the language for our fees, the renewals. And what was amended in there was for renewals, the information we request. And also with this approval, it will repeal WAC 19630 and move the on-site information into 19626A. So we just have one fee section.
Okay. So it's consolidating the language for the different disciplines in that case. Thank you. And communication task force, Greg gave us an excellent report on what's on actions and outreach that's been undertaken and workload. So the committee is looking at that, and we are certainly hoping that we can get a more thorough assessment of the value of some of these communications and get, target acquisition and effectiveness put into our workload planning for this outreach and communication, because we have in large part been broad spectrum communication, and we may find more value to be a little more focused.
We want you to know we were so forward thinking about this. We hired an artillery officer to be able to come and strategically aim for those targets.
I can do ballistics. But
Hey Doug, can I just add a comment
Yes.
right there?
Please.
Ken, you brought up during that discussion that we have a strategic planning meeting with the whole board focused on where we are with outreach and communication and how we want to move forward. And I think that was April. You want to, that's not in the minutes here, so.
Okay,
State
yes,
that.
we're recommending that we have an agenda for the full board in the April meeting, an hour-long strategic planning session targeting on outreach and education.
Yeah, as Doug mentioned, we've done kind of a broad overview of hitting a lot of different areas. And I think we've got, good background information to now look at it and see what is most important to us and where do we want to put our focus going forward. So look for that in April.
Right. Okay, so we had, again, an action item that was for the next committee meeting, for summary from Greg of the review of events that have happened, do some cost projections, target assessments, and reviews. In legislative update, Shannon is watching our mess of legislative actions. And as one of them, Senate 5729 is very much like one that was proposed in 22 that basically said, in order to improve affordable housing, any design or permit application that comes in sealed, they can't do the permitting agency can't do anything except unless it's just their own local building codes. Otherwise they have to approve it. So that's an area where we feel there's some public safety issues. And we've seen enough issues where, as I think Marjorie highlighted, that could very well come in from someone with a falsified seal. Because we've seen that before too. So there's the ability to not issue a permit for, design approval is probably not appropriate. Taking a negative position. Again, we're looked at the next meeting on strategic planning for outreach and education. And that's all this time. Any comments, questions further on the executive committee notes?
No, I don't have anything else.
Comments, questions? No. Okay, I'll assume we've received that, and now I guess I'll go to the practice committee.
Doug's having all the fun today. Nice to meet y'all.
Yeah.
Be here.
Keep your ears on. That's it. So the practice committee met here yesterday. Mr. Blaisdell and I were present, and Ms. Lund as a guest. Mr. Peden was absent. Among our staff, we had Ms. Horton, Short, Mr. Garcia, Ms. Gillespie, Ms. Warrett, Ms. Kramer, Greg Schieferstein. Stop. Okay, and Bryce Dickinson. So we did a short review, the complaint administrative closures. We've had 9 total complaints in this last period, 5 engineering, 4 surveying, none on site, and on administrative closures, 1 as an engineering. The compliance reports, again, we have 3 individuals on compliance monitoring, Mr. Huxell, Mr. Morta, and Mr. Rogers, and all are in compliance with their board orders. We still have a Mr. Hawkins and Mr. Bodge on the non-compliance, and those are kind of fallen off out of contact again. We had discussion on that aspect, and we're not prepared to lose sight of those non-compliances. So we'll continue to manage those and report those. We had a discussion with updated language on 1843. As may be recalled, beyond the current language cleanups, which are in legislative action, we had another task question that dealing with the definition of engineer, definitions of engineer and land surveyor, and professional. So that language was redlined to identify that we are using professional engineer throughout the language of 1843, if that's amended that way. And we would probably retract the 2 definitions, numbers 3 and 6 out of 1843-020, which just say the engineer or surveyor is a professional engineer or surveyor as defined. And so that's not beneficial and still a potential conflict. So PC has modified those recommendations for approval. We've asked the staff to work through and merge those with the EQC changes for the June meeting action. Now, those are not anticipated to be able to go anywhere until at least the fall legislative actions. So there will be aspects of marshaling resources and legislative interfaces and stakeholders. We have
Doug,
yes.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt right there? I am very concerned about this sort of recent change to get rid of the definition of engineer and land surveyor as they apply to that chapter. Elizabeth suggested it during the meeting, and I just want to ask that Shannon and Elizabeth and the committee review that very thoroughly, that doesn't have any effect anyplace else within the RCWs. And just that we make sure, because we've been talking about this for 2 or 3 years, and that was not one of the things that were on the table. Kind of as we decided to just add the word professional in front of engineers and surveyor throughout the chapter. So I'm just asking that this gets looked at again very thoroughly, since that was the definition that had caused a lawsuit in the beginning. And I believe that it is an accurate statement because of the way definitions are defined. before you get to the definition. So just adding that caveat, if you wouldn't mind.
I don't dissent from what you're saying. Okay, I understand. And I would probably personally say that having that definition 3 and 6 that says an engineer, and we're using that tag in that code, means a professional engineer. A surveyor in that code means a professional. And thus the whole effort of adding professional everywhere is redundant. But unfortunately, the problem is how it's read and implemented, both by the public and the courts. And that's where we've run on some reefs. So yes, we will look for any other conflict. And yes, the board will have further action and decision on whether or not those two definitions, of the words engineer and land surveyor, would be potentially recommended for removal from RCW 1843. Okay, so the next item in there, in the committee discussions, dealt with apparent increase in trends to initiate complaints based on an understanding of professional conduct or in considerations of infractions of professional conduct and communication. And right now, that's the committee's preliminary assessment is that more outreach and communication needs to occur with an emphasis on the licensee's obligation of communicating with clients, the public, and other professionals. We literally can't stop someone from complaining, but we can maybe give some more information. We had a short discussion on BAP updates, and the staff will be working with advising AG and prosecuting AG on expanding the use of BAPs, as well as updating 196.09.050 to include other types of violations. At this point, I don't know that we would expect to have anything available effective on that before the new fiscal. Is that correct? So we were looking at a engineering pathway project, mostly that was the State Transportation Committee funded an assessment study by UW, and on increasing numbers of surveyors and engineers in the state, particularly focused, I guess, on civil. And preliminary reporting was scant, except to say that they talked to a bunch of people, and but that doesn't necessarily give a yield a path. But Mr. Fuller was present in meeting yesterday on that subject, and perhaps you'd care to give us an update based on your meeting yesterday.
Yeah, both Mike and I and Greg were involved with meeting yesterday with the University of Washington in a preliminary review of the engineering pathway study. That was a review of a survey that was produced by University of Washington that went out to registrants, licensee companies, as well as public officials and public companies, public businesses. And the results of that survey were assimilated and given some analytical definition. And so the next step is a report to the Senate Transportation Committee. And so we met yesterday to kind of talk through some of the basic highlights of that. And we'll be meeting again, I think, on the 18th with to really go slide by slide with the UJAB, with Mike and Greg and Axel from the Swanson from the Association of Counties, County Engineers, really to outline what the research has found and some recommendations of how to fill some of the gaps. And it's very informative. I sent out an advanced copy of that to all the board members. And so without really a real solid executive summary yet done, I probably would be remiss to offer much more than read it, and we'll have more to come. Mike?
You're correct. It's the afternoon of the 18th where we're going to go through that with the group from PacTrans over at UW. It occurs to me, and I'm not sure whether we discussed it or not with them, but what are your thoughts, or I guess what are our thoughts on having our legislative consultant, Vanderway, attend that meeting on the 18th to also offer feedback on their draft presentation?
I think, Greg, you want to answer that one? So Greg has scheduled our consultant to be there, and
Oh, has he?
agreed
Okay.
to be there at that
I couldn't
meeting.
remember whether we had
Yeah.
discussed that or not.
We do see your mic is active, Greg. Did you wish to say something in support of that?
He does. He's just having some technical issues right now. Give me 1 second. I'll put him on mine.
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Thank you, Kevin.
Okay, could you repeat the question for me, please?
Did you have other affirmation that you're working with Vanderway to represent our interests at this meeting on the 18th?
Yes, Kevin's going to join us for that one with the University of Washington to get him more involved in it as he's been working on other projects. But Kevin will work with us to help communicate to the Transportation Committee and hopefully beyond to the legislature, and really trying to leverage Kevin's expertise in that as he's been very effective with other things. So he'll be an important engine in all of that as we move forward. It was time to bring him in. So
Thank you, sir.
welcome.
Think further.
ACEC, perhaps to getting their
Oh,
involvement.
yeah, we discussed, UW is leading this study, but they're academics and their focus, in my view, has been pretty academic. And I think that it behooves them and us in order to produce the most convincing argument to the Transportation Committee that, and frankly, the most useful results to the industry as a whole, that the perspective of practitioners ought to be included as well, in terms of what are the barriers to enhancing the civil engineering workforce in the state of Washington. Because I'm sure that those of us that are in professional practice, either as private consultants or in Matt's case, as a government employee, have different perspectives on what are the barriers to more and better civil engineers in the state of Washington than would a group of researchers at the University of Washington. And my view is, I recognize this is on the record, so I guess it's not just between us, but they seemed a little reluctant to embrace some of those industry views. But so my hope is that we can get them to engage further with maybe a small group of select people, maybe from ACEC, whose business it is to represent consulting engineers, at least in the state of Washington. Perhaps APWA may be another source of people to give them some perspective and ideas, so that we're not missing things that are important to the industry as a whole.
Thank you, sir. I believe that reluctance to get into the messy side of this is probably not surprising. But the point is, that's the whole objective of the legislative research drive.
I think they can do some good stuff. I just think they maybe need a little steering. And my hope too is that this dry run of their presentation on the 18th as well, with feedback from practicing engineers as well as communication experts and a legislative consultant, might help them not just hone their study, but hone their message to a convincing argument.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir. And Greg, thank you. I think that was also the end of the practice committee report. Any other comments, questions? Take that as received. And the last committee report, we've got Marjorie identified for a Western Zone, NCEES. Would you have?
Well,
a comment?
I think we skip it since Aaron is not here. The intent was to give him a time early on in the meeting to share what's going on the zone, Western Zone level. So
There is a Western Zone Order 1 virtual discussion next Thursday at 3 p.m. Just add that.
Not sure I get that.
Yeah,
much
I've
invitation.
gotten the email. I don't remember if it is through the Borples emails or through my personal email, but
It might,
it should be through the Borples, right?
Yeah,
it's their leader.
it came through Scott Sales. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I've got mine. Or
okay, so we'll look forward to that. And we'll talk about other NCES activities like your APE later and later this afternoon. We could continue and then break at the scheduled noon. I think we probably should. Often the new business will relocate the break. We'll keep the break at that time. They continue to advance the meeting actions. So under new business, we have item 5.1, work experience verification forms. Mike.
Sure. I think we were ready to present these to the full board approval and usage until yesterday, when the suggestion was made and concurrence was made as well, that we ought to add that statement that I noted before. It has not been added yet, and frankly, it sounds like it needs some tweaking before we can get it on that and bring that form.
So you'd like to hold that off to a time specific or like a specific time or next meeting or
We'll
when?
be ready by the next meeting. Yeah,
Thank you.
unless there's additional suggestions and things to add.
Understand. Involvement, communication, buy-in, all good things. So we're going to move this to the next meeting and put that as the next item, please, for
Mike,
consideration.
We should probably have staff do a quick look at PLS applications too. I haven't looked at them in a while, but I mean, if we're going to do something with verifications, perhaps we ought to be consistent on all our disciplines. That's up to the EQC.
that makes sense, because I think the changes we were making were about clarification about what it meant to be have somebody working under the direct supervision.
So you're talking about more than just the statement that we were adding. You're talking about all of the other things that we were changing.
No, I'm just talking about the statement, although anytime we change any application, we ought to double check that
Parallels and
we're not
other-
going away from consistency. And I think, I'll make a point of doing that with the structural application also. There's no reason I can't, modify it in whatever way we're going to modify that verifier's attestation. The applications are a little different in the way we ask for experience, but I think that we should try for as much consistency as we can. So just asking staff to check.
That makes sense to me. I think any changes, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, because I think of myself as still a newbie here, but I would suppose that any changes to the surveying applications would need to go through the surveying committee first before it came to the board. I don't really know that that's under the purview of EQC to start.
Yeah, I guess, just giving a little history. The survey committee and the structural committee were just committees that met sometimes if something special needed to kind of be worked out. And over the last couple of years, we've kind of, they meet more often, but really they are a subsidiary to the EQC, or they should be. The EQC is the board's committee to take care of all things, application business. So the SE is still saying, hey, we're communicating anything that we have to the EQC and not acting independently. But certainly the survey committee could look over, anything that's being changed on the applications, because their applications, are different in a lot of ways too. So, sorry, this background.
No, I appreciate the insight, the background. I was not aware of that. So I think it sounds like the action item now is for staff to take a look at what we are changing on the PE application and verification forms and identify whether that is in conflict with and consistent with or similar to or not SE and PLS forms.
And onsite.
And onsite.
Okay. So I think we've said this is going to come back through the EQC in a later meeting, probably maybe April, maybe June.
I would hope we could get this done for the April.
We'll look for that as a anticipated action item in April. Okay. Eighteen 1843, we talked to in new business item 5.2. Again, we summarize that that's actually going to be merged with EQC considerations with the staff and come back in the June proposal. So we don't have that action here today. Attestation. I think this is falling into the same. Is this falling into, this is renewal or application again?
This is
5.3.
application, and we don't have anything to present from the structural side. Haven't even really made a decision on whether we're going to recommend to the board to add something or not. So I guess that pushes also.
Do you have again, any anticipated time frame?
Make it April.
Make it April, okay. Okay, we'll, that's fine. we got training and we got other things and a strategic planning outreach. So we'll look for that in April. CR 103, item 4.2, 5.4, I'm sorry. On WAC 19609 152 from the EC, so we spoke to it from the executive committee. And I think we have that up in front of us now on indexes. Shannon, would you care to speak to it? Tell you what,
So, oh,
I will seek a motion first for approval of the CES and moving the CR 103 forward.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Okay.
I'll second.
I'm just realizing as I make initials for who's doing motions. There's a lot of M's. Yeah. Okay, okay. As a discussion, Shannon, will you please review?
So, this is a concise explanatory statement for the new section regarding records indexes. I can't remember which law it is. It requires us to have a section of rules that describes the type of indexes we could have. We filed it. We received this complaint back. I mean, not this complaint, sorry, this comment back. And so Elizabeth and I worked on the language that was proposed to address their concerns they had with our language. And we think we've met them all. And so we're asking you to approve the amended proposed language. We don't believe there is a significant change in the rule language enough to make us have to redo the CR 102 process again. So we're going to file the 103 and go from there.
And the
These are the
executive
changes.
committee has recommended that. So if I could rephrase,
Sure.
we've been pushed by some legal groups to ensure that we have codified our indexing and for records recovery and availability. The drafted language went out through under 196, 09, 152, and it's CR 101 and CR 102 gave proposed language. The major driver externally said, you almost got it. And they provided basically pointers to say where your language doesn't cover what they felt needed to under other codes. They amended the language to meet those pretty much linearly. And that's what they've responded, and they've said, thank you. And yes, we're doing these. And then they would move forward the full thing and it would go to implementation. Any further comment, discussion, questions? We didn't lose Matt, did we?
It's there.
Okay. No further comment, questions, and a motion for advancement of the CR 103 and concise explanatory statement for 19609 152. I would ask all in favor of these of this advancement, please say aye.
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 Aye. It is unanimous. Please, Shannon, move that forward to CR 103 with that concise explanatory statement.
Thank you.
And item number 5.5, a CR 103 and concise explanatory statement for WAC 19626A and 19630. I would ask for a motion.
I move that we move the CR 103 forward.
And do you also recommend approving the concise explanatory statement?
Yes, and to approve the concise explanatory statement.
Thank you. That's moved. Do I have a second? Thank you. Been moved and seconded. Discussion. And I would ask Shannon to again give a summary of this.
Okay, this is regarding the language that's within WAC 19626A fees and WAC 19630 fees for on-site designers and inspectors. If approved, this would repeal Chapter 19630 fees for on-site designers and inspectors, remove any language regarding on-site designers and inspectors into 19626A. It also provides clarity on what type of documentation we're looking for at the time of renewal and application. And they repeals three additional sections of 19626A that can be found in other parts of WAC 196. So it removes the duplication.
So we're consolidating code, putting it all in one
Correct.
place to make it easier to implement and getting rid of excess code.
Yes.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second to advance the CR 103 and approve the concise explanatory statement for WAC 19626A and WAC 19630. All in favor of this motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Shannon, please move that forward to CR 103 with our approval of the concise explanatory statement.
Thank you.
Next, we have our accountability audit. Would you care to speak to this?
Yeah, so we started the accountability audit process back in October, and it spanned up until February 6th. And today, just only maybe an hour or so ago, our audit report was published. So it's now out there, public record, anyone can go find that on the State Auditor's Office website. We did really well. I think I heard multiple times auditors say it's a clean audit. They anticipated a lot more issues for a new agency, and we had very little. There were no findings. We had one management letter. And really the areas that they looked at was the licensing application process, travel, purchase cards, general disbursements, as well as payroll and overtime wages. They really said very clean audit with licensing process. That looked great. Payroll and overtime also clean audit. That was went really well. That management letters addressing some issues we had with purchase card use. General disbursements was also, they stated a clean audit. There was no issues found there. But really purchase card use and travel was kind of where the issues surrounded. Mostly that's segregation of duties between the card administrator, card holders. We also needed to implement use of a credit card or card holder agreement form. Additionally, we need more documented approvals. Being a small agency, it's really easy to walk over to your approval, person or give them a call and ask for that approval. What we need is more documented approval for small purchases. Additionally, we needed some policy updates. We've worked really hard over the last maybe year and a half to update policies, but the travel and the purchase card policy were out of date, and there are updates that were needed. As a side note, I have already completed a lot of the updates of those, as well as generated a credit card holder agreement. So those are soon to be in process for approval through Ken and our executive team, staff. Another thing that they recommended was reduction of the amount of credit cards we had, which made sense. We're looking at if we need to reduce cards more. We've already started that process. And then lastly, through those purchases that they reviewed on our purchase cards, 2 of 60 items that they looked at did not have some supporting documentation, which was prior to SharePoint use, really early on in time as big an agency. They had really looked at about $70,000 in total for purchase card use. I would like to say I'm very happy with the outcome. Myself, I think, are stressed out about it for a few months and was relieved and thought, man, I really didn't need to stress about that. So it was great. And we gave a lot of kudos to the state auditor's office. They were very kind through the process, very communicative. And it was really a valuable experience. Ken, do you have anything else to add?
Yes. I want to congratulate McKinsey and really honor her for the work she's done. She took over our agency, and after we had started from scratch, kind of pushed our way through a lot of things, but taking over, because the audit included work before her time in her seat. So to go back and pick up and clean all those details up and get the research done, really provided an excellent representation of our excellence and what we're doing. And so, thank you, McKinsey.
Thank you.
I have our first official cash reward.
Okay.
Yeah.
As long as it's recorded, as long as they do it.
Tip you stole from the breakfast
It goes to McKinsey and her husband.
So I will say as
It
being
came from Katie Fuller, Ken Fuller directly.
in the
$50.
review meeting with the team, with the audit team. There are, we all work in different bureaucratic type venues. And there are some real merits that we have to watch for integrity of monies and such. And I think these have been extremely well managed. Sometimes you can get better, right? I was personally surprised as hell that they didn't like that people took their, left their credit card in their wallet when they went home.
They liked it. They like it locked up. in
They want it locked up at the office. Okay, the real question is the use, not where it is, right? And so overall, I think that our staff and management here have been doing very well on that. We laud the result of this audit.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to add that the auditors mentioned to us that they were pleasantly surprised that for a new agency, and one that had never gone through an audit before, they fully expected to find a lot of issues, and they said, we didn't. We just found like one or two very small, nothing even, they were very, happy about that, and that they expressed appreciation for the fact that we were so receptive to, hey, this is a great thing that's happening. It's going to show us where we can improve. And it did in several areas. So I think we built some really good relationships and rapport with them, which is great because we'll have another audit in about 3 years. So, I thought, wow, that's really great. They expected this complete mess as they came in. They're like, wow, you guys really have it together. We were so hard on ourselves.
I think it really emphasizes the fact of the professional nature of this organization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we appreciate it.
Yeah. So kudos to all staff.
Yes.
And especially.
And the late hours and the extra time and the fingernails that you destroyed by typing. So thank you.
We got a whole $50 for that.
I know, got it. What do they call the glue-on ones? The fingernails?
As long as I don't lose them mid-meeting.
There's a shop right down next to the type.
But I have to also shout out, Fauna did a large portion of looking into the licensing She pulled reports and she got everything together, which was no easy feat. And I know myself through the other items that we had to grab. So thank you, Vonna, specifically for the work you do.
Thank you. And as they mentioned, the next state audit in this regard is anticipated in 3 years. So you'll be on top of that.
I would love to know how you got on the 3-year cycle, because we get them here every year, so
Okay,
Yeah.
Well,
wow.
that's because they don't trust you there.
that must be it.
Okay. So unless you want to interrupt, do we already have Ian on board?
He has not joined us. We went quicker than expected.
We are going quicker. I'm gonna go ahead and take our break now with completion at 12:30. I would like to ask you to reach out and have Ian ready for that at 12:30. Folk online, get your own lunch. And we'll see you back at 12:30 after recess and with the director's report, starting
All
with financials.
Thank you.
Okay.
Welcome back. So we've all had a repast and relaxation for a few minutes perhaps, and we're going to go forward with our agenda. Next on the agenda is the director's report under item 5.6, including our financial report. Analyst Ian, present.
Present. Yes, so item 6-1, the financial report in your packet. This financial information goes through the fiscal month December. It does not include anything from January or February. So December highlights, you can see there, we had 169,000 in revenues. Expenses in December were 190,000. So we ran a little bit of a loss in the month of December. No big concern there, just a month with a little bit of a dip in revenues. Biennium to date highlights, you can see revenues from the last 18 months. Biennium to date, revenues were 3.11 million, expenses were 2.93 million. So biennium to date, we have had a net increase in our fund balance of approximately $180,000. Works out to a fund balance increase of about 10,000 a month over the last 18 months. Projecting forward to the end of this biennium in June 2025, we're looking to have a fund balance ending around 1.65 million or so, and that's compared to our starting fund balance of 1.54 million. So a little bit of a net increase in fund balance expected by the conclusion of this biennium. And then if we scroll just a bit on that financial report included in the materials, the bottom section here is thinking forward even further into the next biennium, the biennium 25-27 from July 2025 through June 2027. The budget is being built by the state legislature at the moment, so these figures can change throughout the course of legislative session. But currently, what projections are showing is revenues coming in at about 4.5 million, could be even a little higher than that to 4.7 or so. We'll continue to monitor that as we've had the renewal fee increase take effect this January. So we'll monitor and see how that is looking. Expenses, we did learn some information from former Governor Inslee's proposed budget. We've learned, and again, it can change, but that budget included things like a general wage increase and increases to central service costs, what the board pays to other state agencies. And those expenses, total expenses for the next biennium are looking to project at about 4.5 million, which is right in line with where our revenues are looking to land. So it looks pretty good at the moment. Again, those figures can change as we learn more about the next biennium budget as it's being built. Any questions on that? That'll conclude what I have to share for now.
Ian, can you share with the board our basic kind of tracking, study, research on potential fund sweeps? By reviewing the budget notes and what all's coming through, how we're keeping a pulse on that?
Okay, yes, okay. Thank you for clarifying. Well, each version of the budget that is published lets us know if there's any fund sweep. That's our final, our confirmation, I guess, if a fund sweep has happened. A fund sweep was not included in former Governor Inslee's proposed budget. The next budgets that are released will be the House and Senate budgets. Those will be released no sooner than March 20th. And that'll be our next piece of actual confirmation to see if the House or the Senate have gone and looked for fund sweeps. In the interim, we hear communications from our Office of Financial Management partners, our budget analysts on the Office of Financial Management team. We have one dedicated OFM analyst for us. And, I'm in communication with him as things like budget reduction requests come through. Anytime that happens, I'm in communication with him. And so far, it's, the conversation is, could it happen? Yes, possibly. But the dollar amount in Borpal's fund is very, very small compared to the statewide budget deficit. So is the juice worth the squeeze for the state to take all of the steps? And it's a lot. It's a big process and work to do a fund sweep on any fund, and doing that for a dollar amount such as Borpal's. They have to weigh if it's worth the effort. And again, I can't confirm it'll go either way, but we'll keep our ears to the ground and fingers crossed that we don't see a sweep for what is really a small amount compared to the state deficit.
Thank you. I don't have any questions on your content or the status on potential sweeps. I'm just not certain I understood quite where we went from having some of the tax activities yielding excess to being projected 10 billion or something shortfalls. I'm not sure if you have any commentary on that.
If that question was for me, Doug, no. No, I could. That's above
Okay.
my yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Appreciate your help.
Any other questions for him? Hearing none, I'd like to go forward to the agency operations.
Okay, and I'm gonna pass the microphone to Chris and Mackenzie, so whomever wants to go first there.
I think first, that's okay. Just a note that in the packet, there is the applications report that Vonna put together. Thank you, Vonna. So just making sure everyone saw it, and if anyone had questions, now is the time to ask them. No? Okay.
I sent her a breakdown now that I just pulled the applications for the PEs off this chart. And you see a very significant variance in the column height. That's almost absolutely a function of the snapshot duration. Because actually the numbers vary between min and max 6 to 7%.
Well,
It's
between these
about
dates.
5.5 per day, plus or minus 7%.
Mhm.
And so I might actually, I can talk to her on, I mean, that's kind of more of a question of loading effort, resources. So maybe I might ask to look at some of those numbers that way.
Okay, yeah, just let us know.
Okay, because otherwise this looks like, oh, in this part, you really need to have, this time of year, you really need to have a huge number of resources. When in fact, it's just, we took a longer period of time to report.
Right.
Okay, so we want to get the right resources allocated at any given time. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I want to make a note that the board training, which is usually done in August, is now going to be at the December meeting. So just making a note about that. We're making a change to the committee meeting administrative duties for the committee meetings. Bryce and Mackenzie are going to be taking over the agendas, the reports, putting the packets together, setting the meetings up, that communication. The rest of the staff will still be technical support. So like for the practice committee, Jill will still be providing items to Bryce or Mackenzie to get on the agenda, information. There'll still be the technical support, but you'll start seeing emails from Bryce or Mackenzie as far as the agendas, the reports, setting the meetings up, those sorts of things. So any questions about that?
Thank you.
Okay. We want to talk about the executive order, the governor's about licensing, report and efficiency.
We can. Would you like me to speak to it or? Yeah, so the governor sent down an executive order. I think you guys all have a copy of it, yeah. Regarding efficiency of licensing and permitting and, really pushing towards a customer service level. And it was addressed to all cabinet and small cabinet agencies. So we don't fit under that direct report. However, we've been coached that the intention of that is for us to participate in that study and determining what should be our timing for applications once they're complete. How long should it take an agency to get through an application? And so we're going to participate. We are partners with the accountancy board, who are under the small agency cabinet, are going to help us by sharing some of the tools that they will be gaining for us to put that information together. So you might see that coming in some reports soon of what should be our applicable, boundaries of our application dates and what does it mean for us? And so a lot of efficiency, customer service directives.
So Kevin will be working with the licensing group to get the information, and then he will put the report together. And then we'll go from there. So, yeah, so we are going to participate. We don't have to meet that deadline that was in the executive order, but we're not going to be too far behind it. Just to let you guys know, because Kevin is a new employee, brand new position, our internal control manager. I thought I'd let you know sort of the top 3 or 4 things that we'll have him start working on is getting the law review exams into computer-based testing despite best efforts, getting a license or a learning management system last year. That didn't happen, so he's exploring some other options. We're having him look at Scantron, which is the exam machine and software that we have for grading and producing the exams. Is there more we can get out of it? Do we need to find something different? So he's going to look at that. We're implementing some lean processes. He is a black belt in lean, so he's helping us lean some of our processes and most particularly licensing, among others, but we have a lot that Donna and I have been talking about, and Emily and Neem too, about things we'd like to take a look at and tighten up the process. And then, of course, he'll be working on that executive order report. So.
Elizabeth has her hand up.
Yes, Elizabeth.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to go back for a moment to the executive order and
Yes.
your gathering of the licensing data. And I was just wondering to what extent you interface with DOL because of the Polaris system and also DOL in terms of reporting. Do they have to include you in their reports? And I just don't know how that relationship is going to work with respect to this reporting.
So I had a conversation with someone over at Department of Licensing. He's sort of our Polaris connection over there, and I asked him about it, what Department of Licensing is doing, and he said there's a whole group that's within DOL that's working on it, that he's not involved in, but we will not be involved in there. Maybe it'll be a sub part because they do accept applications and money, and then it gets passed on to us. So there is still a connection there. They just do a small part of it for us. And even though we use the same system that's connected to them, it doesn't sound like we're going to be, included in their report to the full extent.
We will put that in as part of our story, though, in the report to the governor's efficiency office, that there's a piece of this that we're not in control of. And actually, there's two parts and pieces of it. It's SAW and Polaris that we're not in control of. And both of those have impacts or potential impacts to the application process. And we've collected information to support our story. There's been times that our applications have gone 2 to 3 weeks in delay because of, complications with the systems. And so part of our story will be that. Now, we're still responsible. I'm not asking that we get waived from that, but we're still responsible. And since there isn't, really any reason why we wouldn't, we could use that as part of our story if we choose to start pursuing our own licensing system.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Good question. Okay, and I think the last thing I have is that Ken and I have talked a little bit to the board about work that we're doing on building the agency culture. And we had a workshop with the executive team and our consultant, Nancy Mackey with Open Gate Consulting. And now we're bringing that to the staff and agency at large. So next week we have another workshop, but with all of the staff, and it's talking about our Clifton strengths and problem solving and all kinds of things. So, and I'm letting the board know about this because once we get things moving really well within the agency, we're going to pull you guys into it a little bit so that you have an understanding of the culture that we're building. So that when you're out representing the agency and the board, we're giving the same information, we're representing the same way, and we can talk about what our culture is. So that's it. That's all I have.
Well, thank you, Chris.
You're very welcome, Ken.
I'm glad I'd let you do that.
I am.
That's a joke. I'm glad you did that, even though I asked so poorly. McKinsey.
Yeah, I think I really only have one item, which is we're working on our office lease renewal. They've done quite a lot of work with us, really starting back in August, and the negotiations have completed and now have a lease ready to be signed. Now our lease expires in May of 26, so we're doing it, quite in
Great.
advance. Part of it is that we have a list of items that need to be either repaired or replaced, worked on before our lease is going to take effect. So he is using really that list that we have now to start getting work done. A little example would be that, simple maintenance of the property, such as de-icer. We've recently been talking about that, and he, for example, he's gotten a contractor to come do that for us. So it's consistently done well. And things like that, getting more lighting by our stairway in the front entrances, that staircase, he's started working on that right now, really. So that's why we're doing it a year in advance.
Now, one of the, perhaps my recall is out of sync, but I thought we were under some mandate to move offices and restrict. Has that been waived, so to speak?
It was a possibility,
Yeah,
but we have pulled OFM into it.
yeah. OFM, Department of Enterprise Services, who are the leasing folks, are the real estate folks. They've worked with us through the whole process. And so really this is standard process for lease renewal with the state of Washington. I think we have a benefit because the location we're at is not a regular state facility, but is well below market value.
And your projection on facilities needs, do you believe this facility will continue to meet your needs for how long? 5 years?
It's our 6 years really for counting this, year we're seeing right now, but another 5 years after it's signed. And I believe so. I think we're really at our maximum with staff members in office, talking about cubicle space and things like that. But other than that, there's a lot of opportunity that we have. Even if we did eventually bring on somebody new, which is not in our forecast, we'd be able to make adjustments as needed.
Yeah, our long-term facilities need will stay within the square footage we have now. Part of the reason is we have extra space in our office that would not have been included if we had rented a space within a different building. But our extra conference room, our break room, our copy machine room are all square footage that's included in the lease. So for us to ask for additional space, we have it currently. We'd have to upgrade or change our existing space to make that need. I think we're somewhat crammed in the cubicles in the center of the core, but as Mackenzie was speaking to, we're using, offsite, work at home, teleworking agreements, things like that to absorb some of those issues or influence it in planning. We do have the firefighters boardroom, which you guys have been in, that we're able to use if we schedule it. And so there's some flexibility in this space that will help us grow a bit if we needed to gain some more need. We have more need coming up, I meant to say.
Thank you. Any other questions on facilities and staffing needs and materials? Hearing none. Do we have anything else under other items that you would like to?
I don't think so. I'm just open for questions from all the board members. Seeing none, I'm done. We're done.
Okay, so we have other business. I don't see public board members, so I am with your agreement. I am not going to offer public comment opportunity unless someone jumps up and says they need it now. Upcoming outreach and events. Greg, did you want to talk to that?
Can't hear you, Greg.
Can't hear you.
Get close and personal with Mr. Ballard.
Nope.
Well, I think we can speak to it while.
I'm going to go to,
There we go.
There you go.
Are-
We hear you.
Now
I didn't
we're-
change. And at that point, I hadn't changed anything. It just mysteriously started working again.
Weird.
Sorry about that. We've had a busy few months for sure. We have some big events coming up here in the future. The next one for us is LSAW, their annual conference. This one's at Tulalip. This is February 26th, 28, coming up on us quickly. We have 4 presentations, lengthy presentations, 4 PowerPoints to large audiences there. So we're busy working on those and getting those ready. We have several board members that will be attending with us to help with those presentations. Aaron, Matt, and our Pro Tem Jim will be there along with staff, which is Chris, myself, Jill, Vonna, and Randy. And again, the main reason for them going is to help in those presentations, but also, especially in Randy's case, is to learn and meet some of these important people that he's going to be dealing with. So also, it's an opportunity for us. We're going to have a very large group of licensees in front of us, and it's an opportunity for us to interact with them and answer questions and build relationships with them. So this will be the first time we've actually had a booth at LSAW. Our messaging largely is image, our new logo, the new website, regulatory issues, exams, investigations, looking for SMEs as always. It's also a chance to keep searching for board members. And really it is a very good opportunity to build relationships with stakeholders. So the next one after that is APWA, American Public Works Association. They're at the Tacoma Convention Center, April 23rd through the 24th. We have a booth there. Audience there, of course, are public works officials, managers, a lot of PEs and surveyors, as we've been at these before, and had about 350 people through the booth before, many of them licensees, most of them licensees. And our messaging, of course, is our image, our new website. And with this crowd, we have always talked about monument preservation. We have a video at the booth as well, and it's a chance to talk with them about that and answer their questions about that. This video also, by the way, is on our YouTube channel, which is really just a place for us to put videos with the QRC so that they can grab it and they can take it back with them and use it with, say, some new road crews and figuring out what monuments look like and what they should do or not do, but also maybe a refresher for some of those crews that might need it. So thanks to Chris for helping us get that put together. And then I wanted to alert you that the Spring Journal will come out May 21st, roughly. That's our target time. We'll publish and send on that date. And then in the distant future, Washington State University, October 15th and 16th, those are our board meeting dates. That'll be board meetings, guest lecture, and a meet and greet. They are, of course, confirmed, and we're continuing on with our monthly, and as we get closer, weekly conversations with them with a lot of T's to cross and I's to dot as we get closer to that. So an even larger group of people and more opportunity, of course. So also, as a side note, to finish up here, I am in discussions with UW Tacoma about similar type of event. That could be the whole board meetings, guest lecture, meet and greet, or maybe just one or two of those things together. So we're in early discussions with them though, and don't really have any dates or confirmations with them, but that's all I've got, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
That is a very aggressive agenda. Thank you. And I think the June meeting, we're gonna be looking at, again, assessing some of what we're doing. So, right? Okay, thank you. April.
Thank you.
April? April then. Board and staff affiliate involvement, that would probably be, would you want to care to speak, Marjorie?
Well, I
First on the
mentioned,
board.
yeah, a little bit earlier, I mentioned that I went to a in-person EPE meeting, examinations for professional engineers. And the interesting thing about the one meeting they have in person every year is they invite all of the chairs of all the exam committees who report on the progress of their exams, how many are taking the exams, and what pass rates and any issues they have with any of the particular exam items for the recent year. Then one of the things that was discussed is the low attendance for nuclear engineering exams. And there's bylaws or policies that any exam that has less than 50 attendees for a certain amount of time is on probation, which they've been on probation. And so the question put forth to our committee was, does this exam continue or transition in some form or another? And we had presentations by industry personnel as well as the exam development committee. And it was our feeling that this is a very important expertise. But what we learned is that the nuclear, am I saying stuff I shouldn't, Doug?
No, just the way you pronounce it. That's okay.
I'm sorry.
Usually the word would be nuclear.
Nuclear, sorry, okay. The exam
But it
has
sounds like Jimmy Carter. Okay.
The exam has focused on the power section of their work, and there was a lot of discussion as to that may deter some people who would actually get licensed from proceeding. The other piece of it is the nuclear industry is a lot of the engineers are working in federal jobs or on federal projects and don't feel this great need to have licensure. So the industry is encouraged to kind of look at ways that they can change that. But I think what's going to be the outcome, and it has to go to the board of directors to proceed with this, but to actually change the exam in a way that develops different areas of expertise that get tested rather than just sticking with the power focus. And so our committee just basically said, yes, it can be put on hold or suspended for a year, but we recommend that they bring the PAC study forward so it starts this year and that they develop a more comprehensive exam for the future. So that was interesting to me. That's just one little piece. There are other exams that have fairly low attendance also, but this is the one that seems to be an issue. And the reason that it's discussed is that every exam development is a significant amount of cost. And so are you really serving the public if there's so few people taking the exam? So that's just one little tidbit of kind of what happened at that meeting. So, I am not going to continue on that committee next year. I feel that, I've served 2 years and my purpose for it was being able to see more close hand what's happening with the CBT development of all exams, but specifically the structural one. So I'm going to continue with, activities with the structural, but not necessarily on that NCWS committee. But it's been very interesting. Anybody's interested in that kind of an activity.
If I may, Marjorie, I'll amend some of that and say, I'm on the EPP committee, NCES EPP committee, which is policy and procedure. And we met in Dallas about a month ago. And we've had another follow-on call. It is under the scope of EPP to recommend to the board, NCES board, suspension. And so we've heard those informations, and one of our EPP members has been a member also of EPE and works for NRC. So the driver is the regulators aren't going to mandate licensure. And with the other industrial and utility exemptions that are common across the US, there is not a drive for nuclear engineering licensure as prepared. And in substance, the exam preparations have been biased heavily to power, and they're not prepared yet to move forward with another PACS to reach out and create exam in broader nuclear engineering technology in large perspective, because there's a huge deficit that the PACS members have to be licensed in that discipline, and they're just not present. So there's a problem building a PACS committee to be able to redesign the objective of the exam. And in review, we've also found that most licensees that are in even the power side are substantially mechanical engineers, because most of what they're dealing with there is moving water, piping, plumbing, pumps, valves, etc. And so, we're the EPP met, but we didn't have a quorum. So we're calling another meeting to get enough of a EPP quorum to move the suspension recommendation to the NCES board. So I'm also with Society of Professional Engineers, the House of Delegates representative for Washington State. So it's kind of the legislature or Congress for NSPE. And so we deal with the national levels, and I'm on their committee of policy and advocacy, which is mostly dealing right now, after going through all of their policies, going through state involvement and outreach effects. So at the NSPE, the professional societies, we're doing outreach to. Do we have anything else for affiliate, et cetera, interfaces? And do we have anything you want to report for the staff in that regard?
I don't think so.
Okay, we have closing down action items from this meeting.
Okay, so can remember to put case closures on here, so I just did it.
No.
So case closures for case numbers 20240305 058500 OSW, 2024 10 2789 00 OSW, and 2024 10 3001 00 ENG per case manager's recommendations for closure, so staff will get that going. Ms. Lund to electronically sign the default board order 2024-09-2412 00 LSV et al.
That's sick. SEQ. And all is something else. See, it's the sequences you got. That's the number for the first of 5 numbers. So it's a, yes,
Thank you. Also striking proposed.
yes.
And send back to Ms. Werrick as board clerk to send to respondent. Board staff to look at changes on the PE work experience forms and review all other work experience forms for consistency, and we'll bring to B2C. Ms. Gillespie to move forward the CR 103 for WAC 196-09-110. And Ms. Gillespie to move forward with WAC 196-26A and WAC 196-30. That's a concise explanatory statement. And CR 103 for both of those. Did I miss any?
I think that that's all the actions and completed here. And we have some things that we've aligned to come back next meeting.
So for 7.5, and I'm sorry I didn't write them out, so I'm flipping back through. So we have next meeting in April, we'll look at the attestation concerning applicant knowledge of Washington building codes and standards coming from structural committee. Will be in April. And then additionally, we have
The 5.
yeah,
And then along that same lines, all the applications, make sure that all the
Yeah.
Consistency.
yeah, consistent.
all the applications, thank you. And then we had 5.2, so that was RCW 1843.
And that is coming back in with the EQC merges in June.
Correct, thank you.
We have any other items that persons present recall as upcoming activities that we should put as action items?
I want to request that we have a clear direction from the board on proceeding with decoupling. Our conversation back in December, I don't think it gave the EQC direction, proceed with it. I think there was discussion that said, you know, we might want to look again at the language in the RCWs and things. And we didn't have it on this meeting minute or agenda, but I think on the agenda, I would like there to be something that says the board is proceeding with decoupling for all exams.
Thank you, Marjorie. Now, wasn't that the EQC 1843 markups you guys were planning?
Correct. I mean, if you want to add an action item, the action item associated with that is for staff and Elizabeth to rewrite the pertinent section of 1843 to be compatible with decoupling.
And that's decoupling all the exams and the NWS exams. That was the correct
The
one.
NCWS exams, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So whether or not the board has given us direction, we're doing it. I think we have direction.
I believe the board did give direction. I can pull it up and look and see the exact verbiage, but I believe it was for EQC to look at decoupling or
Prepare
with
associated with
and
it.
In
start
fact,
that.
now that you say the words that way, look at, I recall that I clarified do you want us to look at it or do you want us to do it? And
We're
the
doing it.
direction was do.
So, thank you, Marjorie. I think one of the crux issues is when you say clear board direction. Well, is that board direction says do the changes for decoupling? And so I think instead the action, the approach has been, we're preparing the language, and then if we decide that that's acceptable and meets the needs, then we would affirm, do that and move it forward. So I think that is June. I don't know if you believe we need another action item or another specific agenda item that's not already encompassed in saying EQC draft changes 1843 for decoupling, then we can add it. Do you wish to add that explicit? Because right now that's again forecast as June.
Thought it was April.
What?
Mike, the language of for Shannon and Elizabeth to prepare the revisions to the language and bring it back to the committee. And you're
By
right,
April.
it may not make it all the way through to the board meeting.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it will come, you see in April, for anticipation of providing that as a recommendation to the board in June.
Right.
So, yeah, I think the product line, we're still, yeah, I think most of the preps by April is still what they're looking, but the product really in June. Does that meet your needs, Marjorie?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that at some point we have a very clear statement that the board moved to this direction.
I think that we did that, Marjorie, back in October. In our October meeting, we actually had a motion about, the board telling EQC to move forward with the revisions to the language for decoupling. And we
Okay.
voted on it.
Okay, as long as we have that in the minutes. I know there's been so much back and forth, but that's great.
I just wanted to reiterate that I specifically asked for that before we spent a whole bunch of time working on it. So we
Yes.
asked for that in the October meeting.
Okay.
Any further items?
The strategic planning is on the agenda for the
April meeting?
Yeah,
Related to outreach.
outreach. Yeah.
Outreach, yep. Hearing no further items, I request a motion.
A motion to adjourn the meeting.
Yes.
I make such a motion.
Second.
There's no discussion for a motion for adjournment, so thank you.
Nice.
What if somebody wanted to get going?
I'm gonna guess them wrong.
There is no discussion on a motion for adjournment.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
I looked on the camera.
Careful out there,
DOT
it's smelly out here.
Starting around like Wood